We can be distracted by cuteness and love all day. But ultimately, if we don't protect what is good, then what is great gets taken away. So I want to be free always. And I want the next generation, whether of cats or kids, to be able to be free also. So this is why we're going to do this today. Together, it's true. I'm grateful to be with you. This is a human rights lawyer. In Spain, 251,000 signatures were presented to the Spanish Congress of Deputies, signatures of Spanish citizens, which have not resulted in any action by Spanish politicians. Therefore, it is time, through this summit, to encourage civil society, individual people, the hearts of each person, to become aware that what makes us different and at the same time unites us as human beings is to have our own union in certain values: respect for life, respect for beliefs, respect for freedom. These terrible crimes cannot be tolerated, and an appeal is made to people to ask for an end to this. Enough with the crime of forced organ removal. Justice must be done for the victims. I'm going to ask for blessings for them and for all who are doing our best to bring awareness to the issue in order to end it. The CCP dictatorship moves very well, either by blessing, either by buying people's will, or by bribing people's will, or by threatening people's will. And it can do that with a small group, but it cannot do that with millions of people who are the brave ones who must speak out, which are we, who must band together to unite. This is why this summit is so important. This summit can be the real trigger for people to become aware of the atrocities of the crime of forced organ harvesting. How many thousands and thousands of people have been killed, chopped up, sold for their organs? How many? Seriously, the number would be uncountable because they don't count that which is inconvenient. But even worse, how many people around the world know about this and can keep quiet? How can these crimes continue to go unpunished? Justice in the future will not only judge those who are guilty of these crimes, but also those people who did nothing, whose complicit silence has facilitated and made it possible for all these atrocities to take place in the first place. All of us will have to answer to the call for justice in the day of reckoning that I reckon be called for now. Therefore, as a human rights lawyer in China and in the world at large, the world must wake up. The world has to wake up. It cannot be that after so many years, these crimes continue to go unpunished. Civil society is the one that must give an impulse in the face of the complicit silence of international institutions and organizations, in the face of the complicit silence of Western governments, people with good hearts, compassionate people, people who know how to acknowledge the values that define us as human beings, are the ones who must take that step forward. Never has humanity faced such an atrocity. The challenge is gigantic to awaken people from their ignorance and ignorance of this, and this is our great opportunity.
We're delighted to now welcome Teresa Chu from Taiwan. Teresa Chu is a renowned international human rights lawyer and a legal consultant of Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, one of the co-hosting organizations of this summit. An influential leader, Attorney Chu supported changes to human rights laws in Taiwan as advisor to the Taiwanese government. She is an expert lecturer speaking before international government officials, human rights organizations, and members of parliament. The previous speakers highlighted that the forced organ harvesting atrocity is a diabolical international crime. Mrs. Chu will now elaborate more about a new universal declaration that the organisers of this World Summit have prepared and which will be publicly introduced at the end of this World Summit next week. The Declaration will become perhaps one of the most important documents urging for national and international legislative change to prevent forced organ harvesting.
The Universal Declaration on Combating and Preventing Forced Organ Harvesting, also referred to herein as the UDCPFOH, is an international document wherein mankind of the 21st century proclaims their determination to stop the most diabolical atrocity of forced organ harvesting by the Chinese Communist Party, which is also referred to as the CCP. The other long-winded acronym builds on the foundation of inalienable rights which cannot be deprived by any person or regime, and lays bare the core principles to the universal values, including the inviolability of human dignity and the fundamental protection for human life, body, and freedom. That proposes measures to combat and prevent the CCP's forced organ harvesting from gravely violating the value of human existence. Background. World War II afflicted mankind with irredeemable anguish and losses. It also propelled international criminal justice to punish barbaric human rights abuses as the crime of genocide, the crime of torture, and crimes against humanity, recognized as among the most severe offenses by the international criminal law. The above abuses continue to be concealed and ignored through the political and economic influences wielded by the totalitarian regimes, and were not deterred, which causes victims to increase. The forced organ harvesting by the CCP is one of the most diabolical atrocities. Forced organ harvesting was first exposed in 2006 by Annie, the ex-wife of the Chinese physician, harvesting corneas from living Falun Gong detainees. The exposure caused an uproar worldwide. After 15 years of investigation and evidence analysis by the medical and legal communities, international organizations, and governments, it is confirmed that forced organ harvesting and sale of stolen organs removed from living people are atrocities directed by the totalitarian Chinese Communist regime, and that patients traveling to China as transplant tourists, as well as professionals who assist China in developing its organ transplantation, have all become accomplices in the forced organ harvesting. The atrocity affects both China and beyond, which my grandma literally tuned into the energetic pattern of when she was locked in the hospital after she had some crazy experiences herself. Over a decade ago, Professor Manfred Nowak, then United Nations Special Rapporteur on torture and other cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment or punishment, had requested that the CCP investigate the allegations of forced organ harvesting, but the CCP simply ignored the request. Since 2013, more than 2 million people in the international community have signed the petition to request that the UN investigate the forced organ harvesting by the CCP. The congresses and local councils in Europe, Asia, America, and Australia have also passed human rights resolutions condemning the CCP's forced organ harvesting. In recent years, 5 non-governmental organizations long dedicated to stopping the CCP's forced organ harvesting and to safeguarding freedom of thought have actively got involved in investigating the atrocity, holding international symposia, congressional hearings, and relevant human rights activities to extensively draw attention to and concern for the forced organ harvesting by the CCP. I do believe we need to make it about the man rather than human, because there is a very, very big difference. And if you look up the definition of humanism, you'll better understand what I mean. This year, the 5 organizations have jointly issued the acronym to redouble their efforts on international cooperation to stop forced organ harvesting. Their structure: within the 70 years after World War II, important international conventions on human rights were adopted, one after another. During the 20th century, when wars and abuses wreaked havoc on human rights, freedoms, and justice, the international community consolidated their consensus to safeguard the basic rights and life in the form of declarations and international conventions, and implemented them around the world. They clearly uphold the core standards in the most important international conventions on human rights within the 70 years as the paramount guiding principles. The Universal The conventions include the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights of 1966, and Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhumane, and Degrading Treatment and Punishment, 1984, Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Dignity of the Human Being with regard to the application of biology and medicine, Convention on Human Rights and Biomedicine, 1997, and Council of Europe Convention Against Trafficking in Human Organs, 2015. What we must concern ourselves with here is that the CCP's forced organ harvesting is a conglomerate of grave crime system, including organ sale, organ trafficking, transplant tourism, trafficking in persons for the purpose of organ removal, as well as committed crimes such as offenses of homicide, torture, genocide, and crimes against humanity. Strictly speaking, forced organ harvesting is a complicated and interlocking crime structure. Its perpetrator ranges from the totalitarian regime to civilians. It impacts the entire international community. Implementations to combat and prevent forced organ harvesting at international and national levels. Forced organ harvesting is not only used to carry out the cleansing and genocide of Falun Gong practitioners and ethnic minority groups, such as Uyghurs, but also implicated in massive economic profits from organ transplantation, transnational organ sale, transplant tourism, and organ brokerage. Therefore, to combat and prevent forced organ harvesting requires endeavors at the international and national level simultaneously. At the national level, the acronym expounds that all governments shall take all necessary legislative and other measures to criminalize forced organ harvesting under their domestic law to strictly punish it. The judiciary shall initiate and ensure effective criminal investigation and prosecution of the offenses. The administrative systems of all governments shall bar entry to any person known to be directly or indirectly participating in forced organ harvesting, shall urge their own medical professionals not to train Chinese doctors or medical personnel in transplant surgery, and shall urge medical journals to reject publications about the Chinese experience in transplant medicine and the like. Meanwhile, each country should enhance the public's awareness of the unlawfulness of forced organ harvesting. They stress international cooperation on the collection, analysis, and exchange of relevant information related to illicitly obtained human organs and on the investigation into relevant abuses of forced organ harvesting. They provide that from each country to the international community, the domestic, legislative, administrative, and judicial system should all be mobilized to combat and prevent forced organ harvesting. The largest victim group of forced organ harvesting atrocity over the years, investigative reports conducted by international groups, human rights groups, and governments, as well as expert analysis, have all concluded that the largest victim group of the forced organ harvesting atrocity is the persecuted Falun Gong practitioners in China. They have become the primary source of organs under the CCP's persecution policy. The independent Chinese tribunal established in London in 2019 has also come to the same conclusion. The killing of detainees to obtain their organs for transplantation continues. The primary victims include imprisoned Falun Gong practitioners. Crimes against humanity against the Falun Gong and Uyghurs have been proved beyond reasonable doubt. The international community must take actions to intercept the victim groups from being massive organ sources so as to combat forced organ harvesting and prevent the Chinese Communist regime from selling human organs obtained through forced organ harvesting for profit on a large scale. In the UDCPFOH Article 8 provides all governments shall urge the party state of China to cease the repression, imprisonment, and mistreatment of Falun Gong practitioners and other prisoners of conscience, to cease the forced organ harvesting of all prisoners, to open all detention centers and camps for free and independent international investigation of the crime of forced organ harvesting. All governments must most strongly condemn the CCP for its participation in forced organ harvesting as a state power and stop the atrocity. It is imperative. Conclusions and recommendations. We feel anguished to say that the forced organ harvesting from ordinary civilians in the 21st century is actually prompted by a state power, the CCP, and has been carried out throughout China for a long time. It is indeed appalling that such atrocity, considered as the unprecedentedly evil human rights abuse, has persisted for decades. The UDCPFOH is not only the declaration people make and the stance people take towards protecting those inalienable rights such as human dignity, life, and fundamental rights, but also an important starting point to unite forces overall from different fields of the international community to combat and prevent forced organ harvesting. From this point on, we are calling upon all governments around the world to promote the criminalization of forced organ harvesting comprehensively. The types of offenses implicated by forced organ harvesting are various. For some types, forced organ harvesting is used to eliminate faith groups and ethnic minorities. For some, the harvested organs are sold for organ transplantation. For others, the harvested organs are used for human experiments and specimens. Since perpetrators in forced organ harvesting vary in their intentions to participate in and their methods to carry out the crime, and they use harvested organs for different purposes, no existing convention or law has been able to comprehensively criminalize the offenses. Considering the current international judicial mechanism and its failure to address the actual urgency, it is necessary that all governments, for such brutal offenses of forced organ harvesting, legislate its elements and criminal liabilities in a more thorough and comprehensive way at the national level and formulate the Universal Act against forced organ harvesting. Eventually, a global protective network of combating and preventing forced organ harvesting will be established. At this historic moment, people must face up to the unprecedented atrocity honestly and uphold justice and conscience for the record of this critical chapter in the human history.
写下历史上应有的一页。谢谢。Our final speaker for today's session is Kim Song from South Korea. Kim Song is a judge of Seoul Administrative Court. She's a member of the International Human Rights Law Community of Korean Judges. Her latest research particularly focused on the Korean involvement in forced organ harvesting in China. Transplant tourism presents many challenges on both national and international levels. The act of travelling overseas to receive an organ must first and foremost rely on absolute transparency of the donation system. Otherwise, the recipient may become an accomplice to a crime committed in the name of saving his or her life.
Thank you for having me at this meaningful World Summit. In this session, I'd like to suggest the global magnetic sanction, let's say GMS, as measures to combat and prevent forced organ harvesting in China. Today, we have to face the fact that People's Republic of China and Chinese Communist Party have been forcibly harvesting organs from their innocent citizens for over 20 years. No one will deny that it is crime against humanity. It took a long time for us to face the fact as it is. As a jurist, I think the China tribunal put an end to the dispute on whether it really happens. Now we really need to put together our knowledge to end up this tragedy. Then how? It's not a crime committed by some individuals, but a systematic massacre by one sovereign state. Moreover, this state is a member of the UN Security Council as well as Human Rights Council. It might take another 20 years for UN to take effective actions against the crime. It's not really easy to make a concerted decision among 193 member states who have all different interests and principles under today's international politics. In this situation, autonomous sanctions by individual countries could be one option. And I think the global magnetic sanctions which US, Canada, EU, UK adopted in recent years are good examples. In US, the Global Magnetic Human Rights Accountability Act was enacted in 2016. It applies globally, authorizing the US government to sanction foreign persons implicated in human rights abuses anywhere in the world, freezing any US assets they hold and banning them from entry into the United States. It's encouraging that on July 2020, the US government sanctioned Chinese government entities in Xinjiang and government officials for human rights abuses against Uyghurs. It opened up the possibilities of similar sanctions targeting Chinese government entities and officials. Furthermore, a very noteworthy phenomenon is that these countries are forming magnetic alliance. On March this year, the United States, the European Union, Canada, and the United Kingdom all together launched coordinated sanctions against officials in China over human rights abuses in the Xinjiang region. This kind of cooperation creates a synergy effect. US Department of State made a statement that they will continue to stand with their allies around the world in calling for an immediate end to the Chinese crimes and for justice for many victims. And finally, US Congress is in progress to impose GMS on those involved in forced organ harvesting. Back in 2016, the US House of Representatives unanimously passed Resolution 343 to call on China to end the crime. And on March this year, 5 Congress members introduced the bipartisan bill Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act of 2021, which includes the asset freeze and entry ban sanctions. Then, what are the advantages of GMS in legal aspects compared with other sanctions? First, advantage of the GMS is that it is enacted and implemented only if its sovereign country makes the decision at domestic level, thus making it possible to impose sanctions on the foreign criminals promptly and timely. Second, since it does not directly target the criminal state itself, but only the criminal persons, it is relatively free from the infringement of sovereignty. When the West countries raise human rights issues in China and Hong Kong, China always hits back at the criticism, arguing that interference in its domestic affairs, but sanctions on individuals avoid this kind of sensitive nonsense. Third, entry ban and asset freeze can be justified by less strict proof than the sentence of guilt by the criminal court, since the former is lighter than the latter. Moreover, each nation has a wide discretionary power in immigration control. Finally, it is a form of smart sanctions which can avoid an intended adverse impact on the vulnerable populations who are not involved in the crime. To summary, global magnetic sanctions are available and convenient measures at present against China's forced organ harvesting. Then, can such sanctions discourage malign actors and promote accountability for human rights abuse? In my opinion, yes. First, the original Russia-focused Magnitsky Act of the US seemed to be quite a threat to Kremlin, because it is known that many Russian officials transfer their fortunes to the West. It's the same for China. Moreover, the fierce power struggle in China strongly drive the Chinese officials to prepare for the escape from mainland China. In 2017, media reported that 85% of high-ranked officials in China are preparing for the overseas escape. Between 1995 and 2008, more than 18,000 officials fled the country, smuggling out assets totaling $145 billion. In 2014, an estimated 1.2 million Chinese officials had immediate family abroad. Thus, freezing their overseas assets and banning them from entering into overseas countries can be a significant risk to them. It means involvement in the human rights abuse like forced organ harvesting could be a big risk for their future. So the GMS have an effect of letting them think twice before being involved in the crime. When people outside let them awaken alert, there is a good possibility for them to change their minds. Then, do we have obligation to take actions? In my opinion, yes. First of all, the obligation is derived from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But that's not all. We also have a duty to rectify our faults because people outside China have been directly or indirectly involved in the forced organ harvesting industry for several years. For more than decades, the main consumers of the organs from China were foreigners. Early in 2000, Korean patients began to rush toward China for the organs, becoming VIPs of the forced organ harvesting industry. Even after the shocking and credible report, Bloody Harvest was published in 2006, and Israel took immediate action to stop their citizens flying to China for the organs, many countries neglected illegal transplant tourism. As the China Tribunal pointed out appropriately, those who interact in any substantial way with China is interacting with the criminal state. However, few had courage to face the truth. If most of the doctors in transplant society, except a few, stood on the side of China without raising any doubt on the source of the pouring organs from the China. More fundamentally, rest of the world are responsible negligence in Sisyphus' gross violation of human rights. We witnessed the Tiananmen massacre in 1989, then the brutal persecution of Falun Gong practitioners since 1999, and its ruthless repression of ethnic minorities such as Uyghurs and Tibetans. However, we accepted a totalitarian state with open arms and trusted the regime to be a good partner in the international society. Meanwhile, Sisyphus never stopped its reckless human rights abuse, expanding the scope to Hong Kong, and attribute to the astronomical capital inflow from the West. It has grown up to a mighty monster seeking hegemony of the world through its One Belt, One Road project. What is even worse is that we intently or unintendedly spread the Sisyphus propaganda, demonizing the victims. For example, in Korea, there is an organization which aims to slander Falun Gong and other religious minority groups in China and to refuse the religious refugees from China in the name of Christianity. The little organization is famous for a close relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. Thus, I reached the conclusion that actions against China's forced organ harvesting is not a charitable activity, which is optional, but a must activity to fulfill our obligations. Global magnetic sanctions can be good first step. We already have detailed profiles of Chinese high-rank officials who are in charge of forced organ harvesting. And then, the expansion of the magnetic alliance will make efforts more effective and powerful. And it's important to secure the effectiveness and credibility of the GMS. The credibility of such sanctions depends crucially on our willingness to apply them without fear or favor, whenever and wherever gross abuses of state power occur. We should also keep in mind that the GMS is not an alternative to coordinate international criminal justice. Global magnetic sanctions are the minimum available measures we can take now, and we have a long way to go beyond it. Nonetheless, starting with the GMS, we can have a chance to correct our direction toward human dignity. We are living in 2021 with one of the cruelest criminal states in human history, I must say. And we are deeply involved with the criminal state in various ways. If we ignore or do not make sincere efforts to deter the crime, blinded by profits and interests, That would be shame on the humankind of our time. Our next generations will remember us ridiculous, ignorant, greedy, coward, and cold-hearted ancestors, even worse than those who ignored massive holocaust against Jews. But the people are awakening over Hong Kong incident and the catastrophic pandemic. I hope the Universal Declaration on Combating and Preventing Forced Organ Harvesting bring the center, people around the world stand up and call for their governments to take actions to stop this atrocity. Thank you for listening.
Wow. So I will share the link. It's on the Epoch Times, and that was the World Summit. But as I was listening, I was reflecting on my own scars from getting sweat glands removed from underneath my arms because I had a sweating insecurity. Because, like I talked about earlier, first world problems. Sitting here in this comfort of my grandparents' home, where I've had the pleasure of getting to live for the last 5 years. You know what I mean? It's just like I've had such a privileged life without fully understanding it. And I know that so many Canadians are in the same boat. And we have to start seeing how we mutilate ourselves in order to make our psychological issues better when they are actually triggered by the inability or unwillingness to feel the emotions that rise through the heart and feel too heavy, too much, too can't even deal with that, put it into words, don't even know what to do with it, push it away, repress, depress, compress, suppress, all of the ways we press those energies in motion down, they have to get logged into an organ of some sort. And our physical organs of the body are literally what are storing the different energies in motion that we press down. Well, when we take out those organs, we are then going to experience free radicals where that organ used to store those energies in motion for us. If that organ is no longer there, where are those energies in motion going to go unless we deal with them? Because you can cut them out, but if you don't change the pattern's still going to show up where that organ used to be. So let's just come together and do the inner work so that we stop harvesting our own organs and the organs of others, or allowing that to even be okay. Because as we all know, it's totally not. And when we start actually owning that, that is when we have an entirely different experience of this whole reality, which I mentioned the Falun Gong and the Uyghurs in my book. So I think it's amazing that it's all coming around circle. If you're not already subscribed to my 66 Days to Transform Your Self-Image series, today was the second day about pronouns in relation to the law. So I'm doing an alternative perspective you've never heard before, and then I'm going to turn it into the ebook that you can buy. But for now, you can get it as part of the pilot program, and it's just at ljeh.ca. So I hope you will choose to check that out today. I hope you will leave a comment what this message has meant to you, for you, and what it's inspiring you to do. I hope that you will choose to get involved with Album 23. That is going to be unveiled on a deeper level on Monday, July 17th at Vivian's Country Cookin' in Cortland. We're having a private gathering where your meal and coffees and drinks, just non-alcoholic, are available for $30 from 4 till 7. And we're going to have some talks and social opportunities, workshopping. We're going to come together, and we're not going to connect based on our problems anymore. We're going to connect based on what we want to create. As a coach, I feel irresponsible for not even realizing that my responsibility was to start masterminds with people how to actually live a life that we love living. So we have something to live for instead of fear dying for or dying of. You know what I mean? It's just like, wow, so many profound epiphanies have been coming to me as I wrote 45 pages of streamed consciousness, literally, over 3 days. It was effort, but not at all. I just sat out there on the porch next to Papa. I sat in either the red chair or outside those doors, and then Grandpa sat in his brown chair, and we just hang out, and we're great companions. And I love that man, and I'm grateful that he has held my hand throughout all of what I've went through in order to bring this to you. Not literally, he's not so much of an affectionate, touchy one, but he is stoic and strong and present and there, he's just there. And that's consistency. So I'm grateful I've always had that. It's 9:42 on the anniversary of the day when I got a text saying happy anniversary, would have been 10 years today. Forgot to mention it when I dropped off the kids to the man I was living in the life of. And I just couldn't even quite know what to do with that information. So energetically, I was off. And then he wanted to know what the deal was. And I told him that I just gotten a text from his ex-wife. And then he's like, oh, she must have meant to send that to me, as if that made me feel any better as a 23-year-old insecure girlfriend to a foreign man that I was living in his life and country and home and all of it, really awesome. And then he's just like, well, if you don't like it, then you can pack up your bags to Canadiania, as he called it. And he didn't want his children around that energy. So he took them to the play park, and I needed to either sort my shit out or I could get on the next plane. And so it was like, yeah, this is a significant day, because like I walked the fields behind the old hydroelectric mill in Worcester, where we were living in the apartments of. And I walked behind there over by the river and then into the field. And it was just like, oh my God. I was just trying to figure out what to do, what I'd done wrong. Like, how do you fix the situation? I'm living with a dick. I can't even believe that this is like, I can't even believe I'm being persecuted because like I got a message that like no one wants to get and then feel like put off. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was a really humbling experience. And honestly, the only reason I was able to stay there was because a couple months before that, I had met my girlfriend Maria Jones in Worcester in the crystal shop. And I say it at 9:44 because she truly helped me see the crossing of dimensions and the multidimensionality, and was the first that introduced me to spiritual insights and people and all of it that I would have spent years seeking. And instead, she was an incredible mentor and friend, genuinely. And I'm just so grateful to her for everything that she bestowed onto me while I was living in Worcester. And we were friends. So, very much highly recommend her. She goes by Star Priestess now, still Maria Jones. But she's upgraded with the training that she's taken, and now she's leading sisterhoods in the priesthood of merging astrology with mythicism, and like she's just out of this world. So Maria Jones, highly recommend her. And I think she's far undercharging for her services still, but I haven't gotten anything from her. But like her natal chart reading, if you can get one of those, highly recommend that. Oh my God, that was so helpful to me when I was living over there. Anyway, so if it wasn't for meeting her back when I first moved over there, which I write about in Fully Committed, The Sacred Sojourn of Now, which is my book. If you haven't got your copy yet, you can message me and get yours for $25. And then, while knowledge is highly prized in this world and was ranked as the pinnacle experience within the emotional guidance system, I believe it's important to consider the biblical story, myth of the Garden of Eden, which said there were two trees for Eve to choose from. One was the tree of knowledge and the other was the tree of life. She was deceived because she didn't know the difference and ate from the tree of knowledge. But Adam was then tempted by his woman to join her in the knowledge she had gained by becoming conscious instead of living in the heart where conscience prevails. He got the Adam's apple because he knew better, but did it anyway, just like the ones upholding the lie now trying to hide behind suits are doing. None of us were around at that time in this story, was said to have taken place. So it's hearsay, information received from other people that one cannot substantiate adequately, which would not be admissible in a court of law. But is noteworthy because the mind can become like a minefield set and used by the devil and his agents who act on behalf of the not now. Pay attention to the fact that all charges within the corrupted courts reflect not now moments that either already happened or are presumed to have been premeditated in a future that doesn't exist. The not now is a mental construct and trap used by those trained to use time and space to their advantage at the expense of one who doesn't recognize the difference. Be aware to beware the trap. So when something has happened or is no longer living, it is no longer flexible or able to expand to reflect the potential it could have if another effort or attempt were made. It enters a contracted form that is limited by what did or didn't happen or was or wasn't included. Recorded knowledge is bound by constraints of the author's perspective or the influences behind the point of view portrayed by the one writing the story. And if there are any hidden or covert agendas behind the featured event or tale being shared, we need to be aware to be aware. We need to beware. We need to be aware to beware. So that was from page 148. And like I said, if you can't wait to get a copy of my book until the 17th, or you're not local in order to come out to Vivian's, then just message me privately with your address and email address so I can send you an invoice for $25 plus shipping, and I will get that posted out to you. And if you are in Blackstock, Ajax, Peterborough, Whitby, all of those areas, then on the 23rd of July, if you want to come to a workshop I'm hosting called Lawful Autonomy, Standing in Your Power Position of Now, then you are going to want to do so before the 17th because the early bird price ends then. And it will be $125 to join for a day of deep diving. And I will also actually be equipping those who attend with instruction on how to create a lawful notice. So the practical outline for how to create an effective notice to be able to use, and why we take the suits off of the men and women that we're putting on notice that a trespass is taking place. So these are the things that I look forward to sharing on the 23rd of July in Blackstock at Souls Path Retreat Center. There are overnight accommodations if you are interested in staying overnight, which is always a great option, especially because I know the Frontline Nurses Association are having an event there on the 22nd. So there's going to be live music and all kinds of fantastic fun. So if you want to be part of any of that, it's in Blackstock on the 22nd, 23rd. And I am personally very excited to be part of ending this whole organ harvesting of multiple levels within the human trafficking, save the children, all of it. On Tuesday, I'm trying to organize a group going to see Sound of Freedom on it's playing in Broadway cinemas in Tilsonburg at 7:05. So if you want to come and watch that movie with others who may think similarly to you, and then maybe we could have a little chat after the fact outside in the foyer, I think that would be a fantastic opportunity. So that I'm just creating the meetup group for this morning, but then I got distracted onto the Falun Gong or organ harvesting experience, and that kind of took my attention. So I'm simply going to say thank you for your time, energy, effort, attention, money this morning. If you wish to send me a donation or be a Patreon sponsor, then I would really greatly appreciate that. And I will share the Patreon link for you to be able to do so with the varying sponsorship opportunities and levels and all that good stuff. So you can go there, and then there's also my website, ljeh.ca, where you can get the 66 days to transform your self-image series that I am super excited to be bringing to you live. So Thank you for your presence this morning. And I look forward to coming back to you again soon. I know it's been quite some time. I'll make sure to even out the shadows. But as I balance them out within me, I'm doing the best that I can for which you can see too. So have a great day. Lorje. Namaste. Namago for today.